There's an easy way to end the gerrymandering wars, and no one is talking about it. The gerrymandering wars are on. Egged on by Trump, Republicans in Texas are taking the extremely rare step of redrawing their congressional map halfway through the decade. The explicit goal? Gerrymandering the state to elect more Republicans.
We are entitled to 5 more seats.
That has opened the floodgates. Multiple other red states are following the lead. And some Democrats are responding by promising to cancel out any Republican gains by gerrymandering the states they control. And it's become a total arms race. Now, as many as 30 blue state Republicans and red state Democrats could be wiped out. In a time of a million things going on, this is actually a big deal. Texas did this once before, back in 2003. And at the time, that was seen as unprecedented in the modern era. Now, dozens of states are doing it. And as hard as it is to believe, this marks a new low for the country, the beginning of a new frontier of permanent, all-out, nuclear-level partisanship that would further degrade the democratic foundations of the country. But it does not have to be this way. There's actually a really simple way to reform our process that would diffuse this whole arms race. Before we get to that, it's worth reviewing the basics. First, the simple. What is gerrymandering? Gerrymandering is the process of drawing districts to intentionally favor one party over the other. For example, say a state is split 50-50 between both parties and has 6 districts. A fair map would be that both parties get 3 districts each, like this. A gerrymandered map would be something like this. Creative lines that ensure one party gets 4, 5, maybe even all 6 districts. The execution can be really complicated, but the core idea is really simple. A party getting more seats than it deserves. The term itself is named after Elbridge Gerry, not Jerry, a founding father who served as governor of Massachusetts from 1810 to 1812. During that time, he signed into law a map that was intended to hurt the Federalist Party and help his Democratic-Republican Party. So, as wild as it sounds, this is basically as old as the country itself. Second, how states do redistricting now varies a lot state to state. But gerrymandering is all across the country. Right off the bat, 6 states do not conduct redistricting at all because their populations are so small that they only have 1 at-large House seat for the whole state. 10 states have independent commissions that either totally or almost totally control the redrawing of maps. These kinds of commissions have been a big focus for good governance and democracy advocates over the past 20 to 30 years. And they vary a lot state to state in composition. Some are citizens, some are experts, some are legislators, some are a mix. And 34 states give the authority to draw districts fully to the state legislature. This is where most gerrymandering happens. Some of the worst offenders are red states like Florida, Texas, and Georgia, which have intentionally drawn lines to maximize the number of Republican seats, and blue states like Illinois, Nevada, and New Mexico, which have intentionally drawn lines to maximize the number of Democratic seats. And legislature-drawn maps are usually where those insanely shaped districts that you've probably seen come from. We've been trained to see these kinds of districts, right? Comedians mock them, politicians hold up posters of them, and that makes sense. Look at some of the districts that have been drawn in recent decades. They look insane. And there are still some districts that look like this. Look at the Illinois map. Districts snaking across hundreds of miles to vacuum up the right constituents. Or the Florida map. Districts with tiny arms to make sure multiple big cities are packed into the same district. Or this donut hole blue district surrounded by a red one. But not always. Because even though it's been around forever, gerrymandering is getting worse. The reason is simple. Now you guys know that one of the big things we try to do in this series is for all of us to see outside our small bubbles and see the big picture on politics. And that's a hard thing to do, especially in a time of biased news sources and personalized algorithms. And that's exactly where Ground News comes in. Ground News is an independent, balanced news source that aggregates different coverage from different sources to help you make up your own mind about what's going on in the world. Like this piece on how the reconciliation bill will impact residents of Michigan. You can see the different ways the story is covered and the partisan lean or reliability of those sources. And with the Vantage plan, you can even see who owns those outlets, all in one place, which is why Recount journalists use Ground News to make sure their bases are covered. Right now, you can get 40% off the Vantage plan by going to groundnews.com/therecount or using the QR code right here. It all comes down to just $5 a month. And right now, separating the signal from the noise is priceless. Thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video, and get the link in the description below. Gerrymandering is getting way more sophisticated. For a long time, It had to be planned and executed by actual people. People who knew a ton about the state, about different counties and communities, about the details of different towns' voting habits and trajectories. That took time, it took effort, it took money, and more than anything, it was just not easy to do. But, and it's really crucial to understand this, that is no longer the case. Now, just like a lot of things in life, sophisticated new software and AI tools have made things way simpler. More and more, gerrymandering is now being conducted by increasingly powerful and smart software. Think of it like ChatGPT for gerrymandering. And that has a lot of implications. For one, states can now draw these kinds of partisan gerrymanders much quicker and more easily than before. For another, these new tools can eliminate the need for some of those insane squiggly line districts that we traditionally think of when we think gerrymander. Look at North Carolina. This has been a notorious site for gerrymandering in the past. This was its map during the 2010s. Almost laughable at how insane it was. Those lines allowed Republicans to win a 10-3 advantage in the state's delegation. Now look at the state's current map. Much more clean, right? Way less craziness. Except the split is almost exactly the same, 10-4 for Republicans. Same for Maryland. This was its map during the 2010s. A clear Democratic gerrymander that allowed the party to win 6 out of 7 seats. This is Maryland's map now. Again, much smoother, much cleaner than before, but again, the exact same dominant result as before. So beware old ideas of what gerrymandering looks like. Things have changed, and shapes don't tell the full story. And that gets to the core of all of this. How parties benefit. And now it's time to talk about the elephants in the room. Both parties gerrymander, but all the data is clear. Republicans are bigger culprits. Politically, all of this debate is coming downstream from two big developments. Under Trump, Republicans have grown more aggressive and more willing to go into all-out political warfare. And in Trump's second term, Democrats are increasingly taking the lesson that they need to meet him there.
This is a war. We are at war.
So some of this is unique to Trump and how he's changed both parties. But it's worth examining where both sides are coming from on the larger issue. For Republicans, there's a lot of frustration that Democrats have simultaneously framed gerrymandering as a threat to democracy and themselves as defenders of democracy, while also gerrymandering themselves many times. And that's fair. Many Democratic organizations or politicians that frame themselves as brave defenders of democracy, like the Elias Group or the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, are often intimately involved in Democratic gerrymanders. I mean, this is how Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who signed a huge pro-Democratic gerrymander, talks about Texas.
What we're going to have to do is whatever it takes to preserve democracy.
It's fair to roll your eyes at some of the hypocrisy here. Now, for Democrats, there's a lot of frustration from the fact that they've pushed reform in many states that they control, but Republicans have largely not joined them and have repeatedly undercut those reform efforts in states they control, creating a situation in which many red states are free to gerrymander, while many blue states are playing things more fair. Democrats also, very fairly, point to the fact that in 2019 and 2021, they tried to pass a national ban on gerrymandering, and no Republicans joined them. Though, to be fair, that was part of a broader package of liberal election reforms. They also are very right to point out that this entire saga was begun by the leader of the Republican Party. So here's the bottom line. A lot of this depends on how you frame the sentence. While both parties gerrymander, Republicans are worse offenders. Or, while Republicans are the worst offenders, both parties gerrymander. But however you slice it, the bottom line is clear. Republicans are the worst offenders here. Don't take my word for it. Look at the gap between House seats won and popular vote percentage. Republicans have clearly benefited more. In fact, since voting rights were expanded to all Americans, there have only been 2 times in which the party that won the National House popular vote did not win a majority in the House. And both times, Republicans lost the popular vote, but controlled the House. But the popular vote, district shapes, these only tell us so much. Remember at the beginning, the 50-50 state with the perfectly fair districts split 3-3? Of course, people do not live like this. Much more often, they live like this. And fair maps, in that case, become a lot more tricky. Do you try to accurately represent communities? Or do you slice and dice them to try to represent the state's partisanship overall? And that actually gets to the core of this whole thing. Compact districts are not the same as fair districts. And accurately representing a state's political leanings is not always the same as accurately representing its communities. Look at Iowa. These districts don't exactly look compact, right? We could easily smooth them out. Except, the reason Iowa's districts look like that is that those are county boundaries, and the state has a law that prevents any counties from being split up, so that those communities are held together in one district. And according to independent experts, it's a pretty fair map. No big gerrymandering, and quite representative of the state's geography and politics. Or look at Massachusetts. Republicans often point to that state to explain what they view as a Democratic double standard. Donald Trump won 36% of the vote there, they say, but all 9 House members are Democrats. That can only be done through gerrymandering, right? Actually, no. Massachusetts has perfectly fair maps. The reason is simple. Because Republicans in Massachusetts live all over, the only way to draw a Republican district would actually be a massively complicated gerrymander, slicing up towns and communities and neighborhoods to link many small Republican communities together, which would only result in maybe 1 or 2 red-leaning districts. But that does not mean it's not a problem, right? 36% of the state voted for Trump, and 100% of its representatives oppose him. And this is true for Democrats, too. Going back to Iowa, Kamala Harris got 42% of the vote there, but Republicans hold all 4 districts. Again, that's not because it's rigged. It's because, like Trump voters in Massachusetts, Harris voters are spread out a little bit everywhere. Same for Montana, or West Virginia, or Idaho, or the Dakotas. Millions and millions of Democratic voters live here and have no representation. And that is not just because parts of our system are rigged. It's because our system as a whole just doesn't work. The United States exists at the unique crossroads of 2 things. 1, we elect 1 representative per district based solely on who gets 1 vote more than everyone else. And 2, our national representatives represent way more people than almost the entire world. The US uses a system called first past the post, which essentially means that seats are awarded to whoever wins more votes than everyone else. And we know how this works. Say a Republican wins by a 51 to 49% margin. Republicans get 1 seat, Democrats get 0. Now, it might sound weird to even talk about this. How else would you award seats? Well, actually, most other democracies don't do it like this. They use a system called proportional representation. Under that system, parties can get seats based on how well they do overall. So for example, say Democrats win this district or region by a 75% to 25% margin. Democrats would get 3 seats and Republicans would get 1. And this is how most other democracies elect their national governments, from Germany to Brazil. Some wholly elect their governments this way, some use a hybrid system, but the US stands almost completely alone in only using first past the post. And studies show that proportional representation does a much better job of getting close to national sentiment. And that makes sense, right? Under that kind of system, Democrats in Iowa would no longer be shut out completely. They would get a chunk of seats based off their performance in the whole state. Same for Republicans in Massachusetts or Rhode Island. But of course, that gets to big implementation questions. Like, for example, how do small states with only 1 or 2 seats even join this? And that answer is simple. We need more members of Congress. Again, this might sound weird, especially since most of us don't exactly love the ones we have now. But the reality here is simple. The US has the worst ratio of citizens to elected representatives of every developed democracy in the world. Look at this chart. We are in a completely different zone, especially from developed countries. Raising the cap on the number of members of the House is fully within Congress's power. It doesn't take a constitutional amendment, and it's been done many times. In fact, we're currently on the longest stretch of not raising the cap in US history. And even if we didn't go to a proportional system, raising that cap could go a long way towards alleviating polarization and de-escalating the gerrymandering wars. With more seats, districts can be smaller and more representative of smaller enclaves and communities. And when that happens, the chances of Republicans winning seats in Massachusetts or Democrats winning seats in South Dakota goes up. So, big picture. Yes, both parties gerrymander. Yes, it's still worse among Republicans. And yes, this is an active choice being made by our leaders to allow this blatantly, absurdly anti-democratic practice to continue. But truly fixing this requires a deeper look at our system overall, because it's obvious what we're doing now isn't working. Do you think we need to change the way we elect Congress, or should we just ban gerrymandering? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this video, the best way to support us is by hitting that like button and that subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit the bell so you know every time we drop a video.